Please welcome Sabine Lehmann on stage.
Yeah. I'm just wondering whether I should ask Klaus now to already come here so that I can skip mine, because I'm not sure I'm going to talk exactly about that, but of course I'm going to talk about that. So what we're going to talk about is emotions and feelings. It's something relatively new, which is not yet in the product, so it's kind of innovative, so maybe actually the things I prefer to do in Acrolinx, and it's nice that we have the opportunity to do something like that. So it's going to be about the emotional impact of the content. And again, I'm going to start with a bit of the highest level of poetry, maybe, of content, which is poetry. I mean, I like this quote from Maya Angelou, an American poet who died, I think, 5 years ago, who said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so the feelings are kind of an important thing, and I was wondering, okay, I mean, that's obviously everybody would agree, probably. The question is, well, what about feelings and content? And I think everybody would probably agree, everybody who, I mean, when we were small, we were little, we read a lot, so in literature, I think everybody had that, right? You read something, and it's probably the feelings or what you think about the content who makes you love a book or not love a book or find something really boring or not, right? So it's in literature. That's clear. So the questions, obviously, we're at Acrolinx. We've heard now a presentation about measuring everything, etc. And then, and you know, I like measuring. I like counting. So the question is, can we measure emotions? Can we find out how many emotions, what feelings are in content, right? And so that's a question we're going to ask here. And in fact, if you're wondering, and I was wondering as well, right? Or many of you are writers. If you, maybe you don't know that, it's this bestseller code, and it's a book that has been published a while ago, where indeed people, actually two people, who are actually quite well known in that domain, started measuring content, measuring actually books, and they took 20,000 novels over the 30 last years, and they analyzed all sorts of things. And they measured quite a few things, style, settings, etc. And they found out they could predict quite a lot of things, and they could also predict the most famous bestseller code. Funnily enough, I think the person, at least Andrew told me, who wrote the book, she started writing books as well, but I don't think she wrote a bestseller so far. But I think it's kind of this measuring afterwards. So it doesn't help, it doesn't do guidance, right? That's what you like about Acrolinx, this is the guidance. And this is just analytics. But you can know, in case you don't know, you know, whether your book is very successful, then you could maybe use that or read that. So that's one thing where we measured. There was a lot of measuring going on in literature. The other thing was a person who is going to be really, really important for emotions for us, and that's Saif Mohammad. It's a Canadian researcher who actually has developed a lexicon, and we're going to talk about this lexicon because we're going to use it, and he's done a lot of measurements. And again, we're still in this literature bit. So he compared Hamlet, so Shakespeare, two novels in Shakespeare, Hamlet and As You Like It. And you see, so the upper one is Hamlet and the lower one is As You Like It. And you can see, as you would imagine, if you know Hamlet and As You Like It, that you're going to have much more fear, much more sadness, etc. in the, obviously, tragedy, and in the comedy, you're going to have much more joy and trust. And that's the reason I'm showing that is they use the same kind of, or rather we use the same as he's doing on measuring. So you see already what you can figure out and what Andrew showed. Okay, so question is obviously that looks nice, at least somebody like me, you can calculate things like that. But the question is, so what are you going to calculate? And the question you have to ask first is then, you know, how many emotions are there? And so I'm going to ask you that. how many emotions are there? What do you think? Come on, somebody. I know you're all asleep, so I have to wake you up. So who thinks there are over 1,000 emotions? Okay, well, cool, Richard. The salesperson. What? Yes. Okay.
Matter of experience.
Huh?
It's a matter of experience.
It's a matter of experience. Experience a lot. Over 500, I don't know. Nobody? So what do you think? Below 100? Yeah, below 100? Yeah, quite a lot. So funnily enough, actually, I think 2017, there's always new studies coming out. There was a study who said there was last year or 2 years ago who said there was 47 emotions. So there's quite a precise number of how to calculate that. Darwin actually was one of the first one to, believe it or not, to work with emotions. And I think he was around 500, 600, question how you count it. So we all agree there are a lot. Questions, what are emotions? So you think about all these things. Now, if we think in terms of Acrolinx, I think it would be a bit a lot if we give you 500 emotions. What do you do with that? And so it's very important to maybe concentrate on some basic emotions and see the models we can use. So generally, what you see in more computational linguistics, I would say you have two basic models of emotions. And one of them you all know, but you can't recognize it here probably. So first the emotions model, which you're going to look at, more details. And then there's also the so-called valence, arousal, and dominance, the VID model, which is, I always find a bit funny, these words, right? I was actually wondering whether we could even, from a word point of view, use something like that. You know, if you have Acrolinx and arousal, does this fit? I'm not sure. So, but the funny thing, well, actually it does, right? Depends how you take it. So what's interesting about that is the valence. We're going to see because that's really positive, negative, and that's what the sentiment analyzers do. And probably you all know that, sentiment analysis, something you know there's positive, negative, and that's usually what people talk about. So first, model number one, very important. It's the one we're going to, actually we're not sure what we're going to be playing quite a bit with it. So, but the emotions model is really nice. So you need emotions, I told you. How many do we take? So you have to dig in and see what kind of models there are. So there's this really, I don't know whether you know him, Paul Ekman, emotion research person actually who still is alive. And he came up with 6 basic emotions: anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. The interesting thing about Paul Ekman and why we thought it was basic emotions is that in the 1950s, one thought there was this theory going around that you would learn emotions. You know, that's something you learn when you go along. And what he's done is he actually kind of proved the opposite. He actually went around with, I don't know whether it was exactly those pictures, but they showed these faces. So he was working a lot with facial expressions. And the idea was to show that all over the world, people would associate the same emotions with these facial expressions. And so the proof he had that it was kind of basic emotions was that he even went to, how do you pronounce it in English? What? Thank you. So you all heard it? So I don't have to repeat it. Thank you. So it's very far away, right? So you can't, you don't have, you know, they wouldn't really learn it from other populations. So they thought there would be 6 basic emotions. So that was kind of the proof of it. So we had 6. Those are the ones. By the way, I think he now revised it and he came up with more in the 1990s, but it was really these ones to start off with. Then we have another one, and that's the one we're going to be interested in because you've already seen there were always 8 emotions. Plutchik, who came up with this very nice wheel, with this nice flower, he actually added trust and anticipation. And the important thing here is also that he actually associated emotions with color. And you see also this kind of intensity of color, and this intensity is relatively important. So you see this, you see actually these 8 ones around there, and basically, for example, I wanted to look for joy. So you have always these opposites: joy, sadness, fear, rage, etc. And say joy has serenity, is kind of a not so intense joy, and ecstasy is kind of a maximum intense joy. So you can go along this, what is called arousal base. And these 8 basic emotions are the ones you've seen in Andrew's slides, and also in the one with Hamlet and As You Like, and that's what we used. So Saif Mohammad has actually created a lexicon with 14,008 words, you can read it, and with these 8 emotions, and also 2 sentiments. So that's the valency, that's the positive, negative. So basically, right, anger, fear, sadness, and disgust is negative. The other are positive. And what's interesting, and that's why it's considered a standard, is that it has been done through Amazon Mechanical Turk. So it has been crowdsourced. So there were lots of people evaluating which emotion would fit which word. And the word would be, you know, the common meaning of a word. We know that words are ambiguous, so they had a kind of complex system how to evaluate that. But that's how they've done it. And basically, this emotion lexicon is also something which is officially a standard, and which we built in, where we have the rights to use them, etc. And so we built that in. That's model 1. The other one is just important from my point of view because it's this well-known sentiment analyzer. And so this positive, negative, this active, bored, and strong, weak. So we have, for example, happy and nightmare, positive, negative, and then also this arousal, this strong, exorcism, siesta, for example, etc., powerful, empty. What's important is this first one is the sentiment. That's probably what you all know. A sentiment analyzer is basically positive, negative. And many people would say that this is not enough, right? If you just know, for example, if you have a sad song, that might be something good, right? You might want to, although it's officially negative, it's not really negative. So it depends, you have to be a little bit more subtle. Nevertheless, sentiments can be interesting, and that's, we're going to play with that as well. And as I said, that's this kind of, the sentiments is the valence in this model. So we could play with that. The best, what I found fun here is the bestseller code has, so they predicted 50 Shades of Grey. And by the way, I've been told that it's good that I don't do that in the US with the 50 Shades of Grey. I shouldn't have mentioned that, so I'm glad I'm just in Europe. So what's interesting here is that's the book, right? Narrative time. That's positive, negative. And what they do in the bestseller code is basically what you want to have is, what's really boring is if it's flat, right? You have always the same number of emotion, the same emotion density. You don't want that. You want up and down and up and down and up and down. And what's really interesting, if you write a book and you want to write a second one, make sure you do that, right? It's bad. So think about it, you know, the happy end in all this kind of, you know, stories, Cinderella, it's always happy. You don't want to know what happens after, certainly not if they're happily married, right? You don't know what happens after, right? That's what's usually happening. Here, it's bad, so that asks for a sequel, right? And that's kind of an interesting way of measuring that. If it's kind of think, what's going to happen? So they've proven that as well, that this can be an effective way of doing it. Okay. So interesting, that's for the sentiments, positive, negative. You could maybe do that with trust and things as well, but here they simplified it. Again, so. Now, okay, literature, 50 Shades. So you obviously, or maybe not yet, writing a bestseller. So you stick to your content. So the question is, what about emotions? In our content, what have we done? And so basically, we've took this lexicon from Mohamed Saif, so the National Research of Canada lexicon, with this 14,000 words. And we started running tests and integrated that. And so basically, we focus on this analytics view, on the governance view first. So a bit what you've seen already. So we want to measure a lot of text to see what's happening. And so I took Acrolinx, and I don't know whether I have the CMO who's here to see what we do. So we've got a lot of trust, a lot of joy, apparently a lot of anticipation, which is really good. But the interesting thing is, I mean, so I'm not sales, right, as you know. So it's interesting to look what is really happening with all these numbers. You want to look at the words. And so you have a lot of joy in Acrolinx. I hope you agree, but why do we have so much joy? And if you look at it, so I just want to see, and I think that's really great. I wanted to show you that because you're all in content. And so content is actually a joy word. And why would that be? Where? It's happy because it's content, probably. Right? So that should make you all really happy that you're working in a field which is ambiguous with respect to its emotional state. But that's probably content. And in fact, what we would do in general, we haven't done it. I have to ask product management to change something because it's, as usual, if something appears an awful lot in a content, you have to be really careful. Although here it's really sweet. I think we should leave it. But, you know, with the content, it's something you would want to think about whether you leave it in. Every high frequency occurrence of a word is something you have to take with you know what I mean. With carefulness or with suspicion. Voilà. But it's interesting to see that. So that's what we do. But you can really see that's now from the lexicon. You can actually have a look at it if you want to yourself. It's on the website. You can see that content is positive, and it's probably content. And it's associated. So many words are associated with several emotions. Here it's joy and trust. So I thought that was a really nice thing to think that at content connections we associated with joy and trust, even if it's maybe not exactly the same. So what you can do as well is in our calculations is we measure the density. So in fact, everything you've seen as well in Andrew's slide, obviously in order to be fair, we measure the density rather than the absolute frequency. So we do the relative frequency. So this way we can also see how many emotions are in which page, right? And the question is, so what are you going to do with that? We're going to have to see. But here you can actually figure out where you have a lot of emotion, where you haven't a lot of emotions. And you can actually see that. We start measuring these things. I have to be honest, with the emotion density, I'm not quite sure right now where we're going to go, but it's interesting to see that probably you want to have a lot of range to have once a bit more and once less emotions. Okay. You've seen that, the travel and the travel insurance, where people want to actually intuitively, you work with fear in insurance, right? Because you want to have this sentiment in order for you to buy an insurance. And obviously, travel should give you a lot of joy, so that's what you do. So what I've done actually is I measured now several verticals to see what would come up. And in fact, all the verticals is one of you. I took somebody of you. I'm not going to say who it is, but it's your content here. So banking. And it doesn't have to be necessarily somebody who is here. It's just a customer of Acrolinx. I'm just saying. To make things. So banking was interesting because obviously as well we had a lot of trust. This was kind of anticipation, joy. You see that these categories come up a lot. Always a bit difficult, in fact, if you just show the results. It's easier if you start comparing. So I thought, okay, let's compare. And That's what I've done here. So here I have banking, manufacturing, and software, one of the Acrolinx customer. So I think what's actually interesting, a little bit sad, maybe, a little bit sad, is the manufacturing is a bit boring, emotion-wise. So you really, everywhere the thing has the fewest emotions, also in absolute numbers, while software, it's software and banking are dealing for trust. And it's interesting that software was very, very joyful as well. So it was interesting to look at that. And manufacturing is a bit joyless, right? Because the density is here actually quite, so maybe you might want to think about it and make it a little bit more fun when you write your content. And we can help you with that because we can show you when it's boring. Although boring is, or maybe not, I don't know. I actually, it's not out yet. I don't know how, I was actually thinking, I mean, boring, what's boring? Is that kind of a measure of, I don't even know, it's probably without emotion, right? Don't know. Anyway, so you have something to think about. Oh, I didn't want to show you that, but because you've seen it, I thought that was fun. It's not a customer, not yet. So that's, it's actually, or maybe it should be, I don't know. It's the casino, it's a casino, online casino. So I had a lot of fun, as you can, I mean, people who know me, had a lot of fun running things and trying out, and this was quite fun. So, you know, if you are for some emotions, you know, if you go to a casino, even an online one, you're going to have a lot of surprise, much more surprise than anywhere else. And joy, maybe a bit fear, and anticipation, lots of anticipation, joy, and surprise. I don't know what the sadness is here, so you would have to see. We would have to, you always have to look at the words. You have to take that a bit with, you know, cautiousness, but that's what it is. So that was kind of the dashboard view, the governance, when we run it. So we took the content analyzer for the people who know that, and we can run it, and we have dashboards which take that out. Now, what about guidance? You know, although we're not so far to give you guidance for the next bestseller book. It's something you're actually going to see with Ulrich and Peter as well, and in the workshops on Thursday. But we have we have this app. We haven't talked about apps yet, right? Have we? We have not. So that's going to be the really new, nice thing, or one of the really nice things, which we can, where we tried it out. So that gives us a way of pulling in things into the sidebar and trying out things. And here it's, I took some product updates. We can obviously show in here, for example, that's the green ones, are the positive, the negative, you know, how much trust, and we can actually show the words which come up. So we try to actually do that for documents and then try to show, you know, which words are standing for certain emotions. And here you see, again, trust, anticipation, fear, etc., which comes up, but it shows it really inside the document. Also, you know, no sequel. I don't know whether that's good, actually. For the product updates, the audience engagement, I mean, this kind of thing where we have positive, negative sentiments in the product updates from Acrolinx. I thought I'd take our own stuff. You see that we end on a positive note, and that's certainly something which you should do. We start on a positive note, we have emotion variations, and then you end on a positive note. So that's what you would do. And of course, again, it's not that you always want to have, you know, always positive things. You want to have positive and negative things, and that's what's happening in one of the ebooks which we have. Our content is failing us, so you see actually that there we see already a bit what the words are, which are used, which are negative, which indicate what you're doing. I don't know whether you read this ebook. You should, if you haven't, because it's quite good. And it brings you a lot of emotion, as this proves. But you see that this fear is in there as well, right? Same thing there. That's in the middle. We can see that actually that was in the middle where it went on. So that was the audience engagement. So we're going to see how we measured that, what it brings, so we're kind of playing with that. Again, you can see here in this content which is failing us, I showed that which words there are. And you see also that some words are several emotions. So obviously we want to make it clear which words are concerned so that you can change it. Ideally, we would obviously also give suggestions, but now we're looking at the idea of what's, so you can see a bit which words are associated with them. Again, something probably to adapt to your content as always, but I think it's interesting to play with. So these kind of things, looking at the time, so I'm nearly done. These kind of topics are to come, and what's really interesting, and to finish on that, is that I have one favorite fable from with the fox and the grapes, and it was really nice because there I nearly showed that, but I thought, it's not real content, so I'm going to just tell you. It was interesting because this fable had a nearly equal, all the 8 bits were kind of, how do you say, 45 degrees. So there was an equal of the 8 emotions in this fable from La Fontaine. So that was quite nice. Anyway, so that's where we are. That's how we're going to measure it. It's not exactly what you said, I think, or maybe it is, but I hope still that it was interesting for you to say where we're going.
Thanks a lot, Sabine.